Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the call between the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, and President of Russian Federation. I'll remind you that from this perspective, this is something like an official call because Donald Trump is going to become full power president just on the 20th of January. So as for now, he is probably acting as a private person. Anyway, a call happens, and there are several important details about this call. Let's first of all talk about the official statements. First of all, Trump had a phone call with Vladimir Putin and talked about the war in Ukraine, including a brief discussion on territory, marking the first conversation between the two men since Trump won the election. In advising against escalation, Trump noted that U.S. sizable military presence in Europe. The man discussed the goal of peace in Europe, and Trump expressed an interest in follow-up conversations to discuss the resolution of Ukraine's war soon. That was stated by different sources. So several important things. First of all, according to information we have, Vladimir Zelensky and Ukrainian authorities where it's noted that about the call. So the Trump administration told Zelensky that Ukrainian authorities were notified of Donald Trump's conversations with Vladimir Putin. This is the first important thing. The second important thing is that was a call where the president, the next president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, called Putin. Not Putin called Donald Trump. And I'll remind you that since the time when Donald Trump won the elections, lots of very powerful people called him personally to congratulate him, including the leader of China, Xi Jinping, and many others. But as for Vladimir Putin, since the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris were defeated, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russian Federation, didn't make a call to Trump and didn't congratulate him. So that was the call when Trump was the first who called Putin. And this is very important. You know that currently I see the situation that there are two kings in the world, but telling the truth, just one king can be in the world. There is no place for two kings at the same time. So this is very important detail. Anyway, despite the call, regarding the call, most likely the Russians are going to continue the special military operation because there are still a lot of things like the presence of the Ukrainians on the territory of Kursk region. And today we got very interesting information from Ukrainian President office. For example, our source in the office of President said that Andrei Yermak, the second person in Ukraine, has formed negotiation strategy with Trump in which the main emphasis will be placed on Ukraine's readiness for a peaceful track with the Kremlin based on the Istanbul Treaty of 2022. At a personal meeting between Zelensky and Trump, our president, Ukrainian president, will publicly declare that Ukraine armed forces are leaving the Kursk region as a step towards peace. So this is going to be something like this. Anyway, we know that there are very heavy clashes right now in the Kursk direction, and most likely the Ukrainians are planning to combine, let's say, the vital retreat from the Ukrainians, because most likely they are not able to hold their lines for a very long period of time, and they're going to use this step with the purpose to show the Russians that, let's say, a step of a goodwill. Not like the situation when the Ukrainians are defeated, but just a step of the goodwill. So anyway, let's wait for additional updates. But as for the current situation on the ground, we can't say for 100% sure that the Russians are winning the current battle, the third counteroffensive in the Kursk direction. Furthermore, we can make a conclusion that most likely the Ukrainians conducted several counterattacks and they managed to restore control over some territories. For example, neutral mappers reported that Ukrainians since the 10th on the 9th of November conducted several counterattacks, and as a result of those counterattacks, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the village by the name of Staraya Sorochina and Novaya Sorochina, and currently the clashes are taking place on the southern outskirts of the village by the name of Orlovka. So this is the territory of the main clashes. And I'll remind you that on the 8th of November in the morning, the official statement, the group of forces north in their official statement reported that all these villages were recaptured by the Russians. Now we see that Ukrainians restore control over them. Of course, we don't have any geolocations that can confirm this, but let's wait for additional information. As for the central direction, there are very heavy clashes between Zelyony Shlyak and Novoivanovka. The Ukrainians, for example, are counterattacking in the direction of Novoivanovka, trying to maintain the gap, trying to maintain the corridor for evacuation, for possible evacuation of the armored forces of Ukraine in the artillery pocket, or some call them cauldron, in the northern direction. In this video we can see the work of the 47th Mechanized Brigade of the armored forces of Ukraine that mainly has the Western weapon, Western equipment, and how the Ukrainians were counterattacking the Russian forces. And telling the truth, this is not the first video from this area. For example, several days ago, on the 8th of November, on the 9th of November, we got another video of work of Ukrainian forces in the same direction, but this time the counterattacks were carried out by the 17th Heavy Mechanized Brigade of the Armored Forces of Ukraine. So we see that Ukrainians are counterattacking wave by wave, one brigade by another brigade, and based on the latest video we got from the 47th Mechanized Brigade, we decided to color this territory in Ukrainian favor, because we have 3 days in a row of pictures that confirm Ukraine control and no control by the armored forces of Ukraine. On the other side, the Russians are trying to counterattack in the south, in direction to the south of Zelený Shlях, trying probably to outflank the Ukrainians in Leonidovo and Alexandria, because the main Ukrainian attacks were carried out exactly from this direction. But as for the Russian counterattacks, the several vehicles of the armored forces of Russian Federation were destroyed as a result of FPV drone attacks conducted by the 225th Separate Assault Brigade of the armored forces of Ukraine. Anyway, based on this video, we have also adjusted the map, at least the southeastern part of the village by the name of Zelený Shlях. So as you can see, the clashes here are very heavy. The Russians yet haven't introduced their 50,000 strong force in this area, but everything is ready for this. Maybe everything depends on the next step, or the next move of Kiev regarding negotiation and regarding this good act of will with withdrawing their troopers from this territory. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the northern Kupyansk direction, because from this territory we are also receiving very interesting details and updates. Of course, as usually, we have a lot of videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions with total tower systems and with FABs. This is the regular picture for this direction. Every single day we got another video of how the Russians destroyed another temporary position or temporary deployment point of the armored forces of Ukraine. But as for today, we got very important statement from the northern part of Kupyansk. The Russians, very reliable Russian sources, military experts, let's call him like this, reported that the Russians managed to break through the Ukraine defense belt in the northern part of Kupyansk, and as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to take under control the territory in the vicinity of the stadium by the name of Oskol. So we have the river of Oskol, this is the river of Oskol, and this is the stadium. It's a football or soccer stadium, and this stadium has just the name as the river Oskol, and according to some pro-Russian resources, the Russians managed to dig in deeper and to take foothold in the vicinity of this territory. So summarizing everything, the Russians during the previous several days managed to break through the Ukraine defense belt and basically to answer the city of Kupyansk itself. Currently we can't confirm this information. This is just a very interesting post that was published by a very reliable resource. Let's wait for additional updates, but if this information is correct, then the official battle for Kupyansk itself has begun. Now let's move further. There are very interesting situations in the vicinity of Borova. The Ukrainians are expecting the activization of Russian attacks in this direction, but as for now, the Russians are just bombing and attacking. So it's very difficult to imagine how the Russians are able to conduct two attacks at the same time in the direction of Kupyansk and in the direction of Borova, but maybe the Russians have lots of resources, who knows. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the city of Chasiv Yar, and neutral mappers reported that Ukrainians during the previous day managed to conduct several counterattacks, more or less successful ones, and as a result of those counterattacks, the Russians lost their positions, some positions on the Ukrainian side of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. So let's compare the map. This is the map on the by the end of the 10th of November, and this is the map at the beginning of the 11th of November. So the Ukrainians managed to restore control over these territories. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operation. According to different mappers, both neutral mappers and pro-Ukrainian mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive operation, managed to improve their positions along the M30 road and 30 road between the city of Selidova and the city of Pokrovsk. A very important strategical stronghold was captured or about to be captured by the Russians. The stronghold is located inside of this red line, and this is the primary task for the Russians, at least for the next 24 or maybe 12 hours. Now let's talk about the city of Solntsevka. The pro-Russian resources sources reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions and to shorten the line along the river of Salona. So let's compare the map. This is the situation by the beginning of the 10th of November. The Russians just secured the northeastern part of Solntsevka, and today we got the reports that the Russians managed to improve their positions along the river and to connect the front line between the northeastern part of Solntsevka and the village of Voznesenka. Also, according to pro-Russian mappers, the village of Voznesenka was captured and secured by the Russians. As for neutrals and pro-Ukraine mappers, these mappers don't confirm this information. Now let's talk about the most important progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation. We're talking about the outflanking of Kurakhove. I'll remind you that since the beginning of Kurakhove offensive operation, we were talking a lot that most likely the Russians are not planning to attack Kurakhove itself from the east, because this is very risky, very dangerous operation that which most likely will lead to the significant losses of the armed forces of Russian Federation. And according to one of the Russian patterns, they tried to outflank any position despite the difficulties and problems, because outflanking always costs less than the let's say assault in front. If you assault in front, you have probably multiple times more losses in comparison with the outflanking operation. And today, according to the video that was published by the 33rd Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor in the fields between the city of Kurakhove and the river of Sukhe Yali. In this video, we can see several artillery strikes and FPV drone attacks on the Russian forces in the fields. And in the final part of the video, when the drones and artillery strikes weren't enough, the Ukrainians sent Leopard, and Leopard tank was attacking the Russian forces from a very close distance. The Russian positions were located exactly in this tree line, and the Ukrainian tank was attacking them somewhere from here. So the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians that were located along this tree line. Most likely these strongholds were captured by the Russians. Anyway, based on this video, we can make a conclusion that the current distance between the edge Russian positions and the first buildings of the village by the name of Dalnya is already less than 700 meters, which is obviously the beginning for the battle for the settlement itself. So as we discussed, and most likely our conclusions we made in the past were correct. The Russians, first of all, are trying to outflank the Ukrainians in Kurakhove by taking under control the village of Dalnya and by cutting this territory in two. If the Russians are able to finish this mission successfully, then the Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back without any resistance from the cities and villages that located to the southeast of the 0510 road. We are talking about Uspienovka, Ganovka. Ukrainians would be forced to retreat and to abandon their positions, because otherwise they would be caught in cauldron. The Russians understand this as well, so that's why they're attacking exactly in this direction, trying first of all to make this attack less expensive when talking about assets and manpower. Furthermore, let's compare the map. This is the situation on the 10th of November by the end, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 11th of November. The Russians managed to take under control or to provide us additional geolocations that confirm Russian control over this territory. Pro-Ukrainian mappers confirmed the improvements of Russian positions between Antonovka and Pobeda, and we can see the progress, additional maintaining of the line between Maximovka and Trudova. The Russians are attacking from three directions the settlements along the river of Sukhe Yali. Furthermore, we start receiving very interesting and very exciting reports from the Velyka Novosilka direction. First, let's talk about the village of Makarovka, because yesterday on the 11th of November, on the 10th of November in the late evening, we started receiving reports about Russian control over the village of Makarovka. We have just one picture, we don't have video, and most of the mappers have adjusted their maps in Russian favor, but you need to understand that currently nobody managed to geolocate this picture. Maybe this picture isn't even from the village of Makarovka. The author of this post is saying that the picture was made on the territory of the village of Makarovka, and we can see the building that was reduced to ruins and stand-alone Russian flag. Maybe the flag was dropped by the Russian drone, so we can't be for sure, but anyway, for example, pro-Russian mappers, based on this photo, have already adjusted the map in Russian favor. Different neutral mappers also adjusted at least 50% of the settlement in Russian favor. As for us, we have turned this territory in contested area until we get additional clarifications about the situation on the ground. Anyway, the Russians most likely managed to improve their positions. We believe that the Russians were attacking because it was something that we expected. And furthermore, right after the posts about Makarovka, some very reliable Russian resources reported that unofficial reports have come in that Russian troops have stormed the village of Velyka Novosilka. The battle lasted only a few hours. So the sources are saying that the Russians conducted unexpected offensive operation along two lines in the direction of Velyka Novosilka from the southeast, as I understand, and from the northeast. And as a result of these attacks, the Ukrainian defense belt was destroyed completely. The Ukrainians didn't expect such a heavy pressure and most likely were forced to retreat in the northwestern part. I'm not sure that the Ukrainians abandoned their positions completely, but most likely the Russians managed to dig in deeper. If this information is correct, then we can say that the beginning of complete Ukrainian defeat has begun, because without resistance to retreat from such strongholds is a very means that there is a very poor situation. We start continue receiving reports from Takmachka. Most likely the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian plans about further attempts or further plans to attack these settlements, so the Ukrainians are trying to improve their positions. They brought a significant number of engineering equipment with the purpose to build additional strongholds in the fortifications, and since the beginning of November we were receiving a lot of videos of how the Russians were bombing and attacking the engineering forces of the armored forces of Ukraine, and as a result of those attacks the Ukrainians suffered the significant losses, and now, according to the author of the post, the Ukrainians don't have engineering forces in this direction at all. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.